My name is Sophia. I'm 32 years old and an art teacher at a high school in Oregon. All my life, I've believed that family is irreplaceable. Especially the bond I shared with my grandmother, the woman who taught me how to brew mint tea, embroider handkerchiefs, and cherish the sparkle of sunlight through glass windows. But that belief shattered just 1 week after she passed away. My grandmother Eleanor lived in an old farmhouse from the early 20th century, with a wide porch and a garden full of fragrant lavender. She used to say, "This house will be yours, Sophia, because you're the only one who sees it with your heart." Her words felt like a whisper in the evening breeze, as I stood hesitating on the worn steps, still clutching the express-delivered envelope from the lawyer's office. The lawyer had just finished reading the will. In it, my grandmother had clearly left the house to me, but before I could even react, my mother, Carol, casually reached for the set of keys on the table, as if it was her given right. "I know you're emotional, but let's be realistic, Sophia," she said in a voice as sweet as syrup but cold as ice. "This house needs too many repairs. Your father and I just want to spare you the burden." I looked at her, then at my father, Walter, who simply lowered his head, avoiding my eyes, his hands nervously clasped together. They were talking about my grandmother's house, the place I grew up in every summer, like it was just another convenient item to be boxed away. "I don't need to be protected," I said, my voice trembling. "Grandma left me this house. It's in the will. I have the right." A scoff came from the corner of the room. My brother Brandon leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, not even trying to hide his mocking smile. "Soph, do you even know how high the property taxes are here? With your teacher's salary, holding onto this house is just a fantasy." The scent of lavender still lingered faintly in the air. Less than a month ago, Grandma and I were sipping tea in the back room, and she was telling me about her first love with a gentle smile. And now, I was watching my family tear apart her memory like it was a pile of clearance sale leftovers. "You can't do this," I blurted out, my voice nearly choking. "Actually," my sister Vanessa cut in, face void of any remorse, "Mom and Dad have legal authority over the estate. They have power of attorney. The transaction's already been made." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What transaction?" "We found a buyer," my mother replied quickly, adjusting her silk collar like everything was already settled. "It's a great offer, above market value. The paperwork is signed. There's nothing more to discuss." I tightened my grip on the envelope in my hand. I hadn't opened it yet, because per instructions I had to wait until after the reading of the will. It had been sent by Grandma's lawyer, and she had written clearly, "Only open after everything has been said." "Get out of my grandmother's house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the whole room seemed to freeze. "Don't be dramatic, Sophia." My father spoke for the first time, his voice dry. "We're still a family." I let out a hollow laugh that echoed through the heavy silence. Families don't do this to each other. They left the house one by one, but I could see relief in their eyes. My mother was the last to leave, but she paused at the doorway, turning back to say with a cryptic tone, "We're meeting the buyer tomorrow to hand over the keys. You should come. It'll be better for you to face reality." When the door closed, I stood there in complete silence. I sank into Grandma's favorite floral armchair and slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a carefully folded piece of paper and a small brass key. "My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, then everything has happened just as I expected. But don't worry. I've left you something they don't know about. It will help you reclaim what's rightfully yours. Check beneath the third brick on the garden wall, the one with the carved sparrow. Love always finds its way, if you have enough faith." My heart pounded. Grandma always said, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to listen. It seemed she had prepared for every possibility, and now it was my turn to act. I stood up, still clutching the key. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting soft golden light across the house walls. This house hadn't finished telling its story, and I would be the one to listen to it until the very end. It was already dark when I stepped into the garden, holding a small flashlight and the brass key Grandma left me. The crisp early-season air made me shiver, but my heart burned with determination. Each step on the mossy stone path took me back to childhood summers, watering plants with Grandma, picking up fallen petals, listening to her speak of the things grown-ups hide in places no one notices. I stopped at the old stone wall at the edge of the garden, the one where she used to sit quietly and embroider. Running my fingers over the bricks in the dim light, I searched for the carved sparrow. It took a few minutes, but at last, my fingers brushed against an oddly smooth curve, just as she'd written. A brick with a sparrow spreading its wings. I gently pried with my fingertip, and to my surprise, the brick came loose easily. Inside was a small tin box wrapped in vintage-patterned silk fabric. My heart pounded. I opened it to find a thick bundle of documents tied with a blue ribbon, a USB drive, and a handwritten note. My dear Sophie, they will try to take everything from you, but they don't know I was one step ahead. Inside these pages is the truth that the law cannot ignore. Take them to my lawyer, Abigail Hart. Trust no one else but her. Love you, Grandma Eleanor. Without hesitation, the next morning, I drove to Abigail's office, a small but elegant building in the heart of the city. Miss Hart was a woman in her early 40s, her brown hair neatly pinned back, and her sharp eyes looked like they could read every thought. When I placed the documents on her desk and explained everything, she stayed silent for a long moment, then began flipping through the first few pages. Less than 10 minutes later, her expression changed noticeably. Sophia, she said, her voice serious. Your grandmother was incredibly thorough. This document is a legally valid codicil to the original will. It was notarized 6 months before her passing. I straightened in my seat. Does it say anything specific? She nodded. A very clear clause. The house cannot be sold without your direct, signed consent, verified by a designated third party. Me. Even though your parents held power of attorney before, this clause was written to override any decision in case of a conflict of interest. I held my breath. But they said the deal was done. They gave me a copy of the sale agreement with my signature. Abigail silently flipped another page, then slid a photocopy of the contract across the desk to me. The signature at the bottom bore my name, but I instantly recognized that it wasn't my handwriting. The S was in that distinct swooping style my mother always used. I shivered. Can it be proven as forged? I asked, my voice dropping low. Absolutely, Abigail replied. If you have proof you weren't here on the date the papers were signed, this goes beyond an unauthorized sale. This is signature fraud, and the legal consequences are serious. I nodded, my hand tightening. I was in Denver that day. I have the plane ticket, hotel receipts, even social media check-in photos. I have everything. She gave a slight smile. Then we have the upper hand. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. Mom knows what you're doing. Don't push yourself out of the family. I held the screen up to Abigail. She just smirked. A textbook move from someone who's scared. You should be prepared. When faced with the truth, some people react more extremely than you'd expect. We started making a plan immediately. Abigail would send a legal notice to the buyer to halt the property transfer and request a forensic analysis of the signature. I would gather all my proof of being out of town that day and keep Grandma's documents secret until Abigail confirmed my legal ownership. But I didn't expect that by late afternoon, when I returned to Grandma's house, I'd find the locks had been changed. On the oak door was a crudely taped note. No entry. Property now under buyer's management. I stood there, my hands clenched inside my coat pockets, while inside me, a quiet fire of resolve was beginning to burn. Did they really think a changed lock could erase everything Grandma left for me? I pulled out my phone and texted Abigail. They changed the locks, but I'm not backing down. Ready for the next step? I had never felt more certain this wasn't just about a house anymore. This was a wake-up call, that sometimes the people closest to you are the very ones willing to erase you from their lives if it gains them something. And I, Sophia Bennett, wasn't going to let that happen. On Monday morning, I returned to Abigail Hart's office. She was already waiting, eyes sharp with determination, as if ready for a legal battle since sunrise. "The buyer's name is Daniel Grayson," she said as I sat down. "Real estate investor from Sacramento. He wired a deposit and plans to take possession of the house in 3 days." I frowned. "Does he know I didn't sign the sale papers?" Abigail shook her head. "There's no indication he's aware, but we'll find out. I've arranged a meeting with him here this afternoon. You should be there too." At 2:30 p.m., Daniel walked in. Tall, polished, wearing a light blue shirt crisply pressed, with the calm confidence of someone used to being in control. But when his eyes met mine, that confidence wavered for a brief second. "I'm guessing you're Sophia?" he asked, taking a seat beside Ms. Hart. I nodded. "My grandmother's house. The one you're trying to buy." Abigail opened the file and slid the sale contract in front of him. "Mr. Grayson, this is the contract you signed with Sophia's family. But there's a serious issue. The signature representing the legal owner has been forged." Daniel furrowed his brow, his eyes scanning the signature. "Is it hers?" I spoke up. "That signature isn't mine. And on the day the contract was signed, I was in Denver. I have solid proof." A moment of silence passed. Daniel looked me straight in the eye, then turned to Abigail. "You're saying forged? They signed it for her?" "Not just forged," Abigail replied firmly. "They violated a notarized codicil to the will. It clearly states that the house cannot be transferred without Sophia's direct consent, verified by me. This contract is entirely void." Daniel leaned back in his chair, clearly shocked. "They told me you had agreed, that you were too busy to attend the signing." I gave a faint smile. "They also told me the house was just a burden that no one wanted to keep." Daniel paused, his gaze slowly shifted into one of suspicion. "I don't like being caught in the middle of lies. If this contract isn't valid, I want no part of it." Abigail gave a small smile. "We're not asking you to proceed with the deal. But if you're willing to clarify what you were told by the sellers, it could be legally significant." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "I've got nothing to hide. I'll cooperate. But you should know. Over the past few weeks, your mother kept pressuring me to sign quickly. She said there was a financial urgency, and if I delayed, she'd go with another buyer." I looked at Abigail. She was trying to rush everything before I found out. Daniel nodded, pulling out his phone. "I've got the whole chain of emails and texts. I can print them and sign a statement if needed." Abigail jotted down notes in the file. "We'll need everything, both content and timestamps, especially anything that mentions Sophia." Daniel picked up a folder he had brought. "I also have this. There's a line where she says, 'We are the rightful heirs. The girl won't be able to interfere. This deal is for the good of the whole family.'" I felt a tightness in my chest. A short sentence, but calculated and cold. To them, I was nothing more than an obstacle in their transaction. Daniel looked up, his gaze softening. "I'm truly sorry. If I had known something was wrong, I wouldn't have gotten involved." I nodded. "It's not your fault. You were just used, like I was." Abigail gathered the documents, arranging them neatly. "Thank you, Daniel. Your testimony and evidence will be extremely helpful." He stood, shaking hands with us. "If you need anything else, just reach out. I don't want to help anyone take something that doesn't belong to them." Once he left, the office fell silent again. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes still on the file on the desk. "So they really went this far," I said slowly. "Forging my signature, lying to the buyer, pushing me out of my own grandmother's house." Abigail looked at me, her expression resolute. "And now it's time for you to take everything back. They didn't count on you fighting back." I pressed my lips together, then stood. "I won't let my grandmother down. They think a few documents can erase everything, but they forgot one thing." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "What?" I turned to face her. That a true legacy doesn't lie in property. It lies in the truth. And I would be the one to bring that truth into the light. That evening, I got a call from someone I never expected to take my side. Vanessa. My sister, always the perfect replica of our mother, composed, polished, and forever defending our parents without question. But her voice on the phone didn't sound like the usual Vanessa. It was hesitant, uncertain. Sophia, can we meet? This is important. I was quiet for a few seconds, then asked, Where? Lantern Cafe, corner of 5th and Maple. Don't tell anyone in the family. 30 minutes later, I walked into the cafe with a swirl of mixed emotions, caution, anger, and a hint of curiosity. Vanessa was already seated in the corner, hands wrapped around a full coffee cup, her eyes fixed on the window as if avoiding reality. When she saw me, she stood quickly, pulling out a chair for me. I don't even know where to start, she said, her voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear. Start with the truth, I replied coldly. Vanessa took a deep breath. I went through some papers in Mom's drawer. There are things that don't match the will you and the lawyer have. I froze. What do you mean? They altered documents. Mom has a fake version of the will. And there's a financial file too. Shady loans, questionable bills. Sophia, I think Dad's company is under investigation. They need money fast. That's why they tried to sell Grandma's house. It felt like the air froze in my lungs. I'd suspected it, but hearing it from my own sister was still a shock. And the signature on the house sale contract? Vanessa looked at me, guilty. Brandon signed it. Mom convinced him. They said it was the only way to save the company from collapsing. I clenched both fists. They think forging legal documents is acceptable? Vanessa didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. There's more, she continued. They're planning to meet with a new buyer at the Regency Hotel next Friday night, 8 p.m. Room 746. They're trying to renegotiate, offering additional assets in the deal. I frowned. What assets? I'm not sure, but Mom mentioned high-value items. I think it's the things Grandma kept hidden. Maybe paintings, jewelry, or something important you haven't discovered yet. I nodded slowly, the puzzle pieces clicking into place in my mind. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Vanessa bit her lip. Because I can't take it anymore. Mom's always wanted everything to go her way, ever since we were kids, but this time, they've gone too far. Grandma left that house to you, and I know she did it because she believed you were the only one who could protect it. I can't keep looking the other way. I looked at her. For the first time, I saw an unguarded honesty in her eyes. Do you want help? She asked quietly. I nodded, my voice firm. Would you be willing to testify if this goes to court? Vanessa hesitated for a moment, then nodded decisively. Yeah. I pulled out my phone and texted Abigail. New info. Secret meeting at Regency Hotel, room 706, 8 p.m. Friday. Bring recording equipment. Seconds later, the reply appeared. Received. Ready. I'll meet you before the meeting. I looked up at Vanessa. Thank you. Even if it's late, you made the right choice. She gave a soft, bittersweet smile. Grandma once told me, choosing what's right late is better than never at all. Maybe it's time I finally listened to her. That Friday evening, Abigail and I arrived at the Regency Hotel right on time. On the 7th floor, we rented room 705, directly next to where the secret meeting would take place. Abigail installed the recording device into the wall outlet, and I pressed my ear against the thin wall, listening as if waiting for the truth to come pouring out. My mother's voice came first, cold and calculated. We only have tonight. The auditors will go through the books on Monday. If the money isn't in the business account, they'll start digging. A man's voice followed, probably my father's. We can't let everything fall apart because of that girl. My mother exhaled sharply. Sophia won't know a thing. The buyer agreed to keep quiet if we turn over all of Eleanor's hidden valuables. I held my breath. Valuables? Behind the built-in cabinet in the library, Mom continued. Eleanor had a collection of pre-war artisan crafts, worth hundreds of thousands. I looked at Abigail. She had recorded the entire exchange, and her eyes flashed with satisfaction. "We've got what we need," she whispered. "Now we just bring it to light." I nodded, my heart pounding. My family had thrown away every moral line to hold on to something that no longer belonged to them. But they'd forgotten one thing. I was no longer the easily led little girl I used to be. I was the one Grandma trusted, and I wouldn't let her down. The voices from room 706 carried through the paper-thin wall. Each word cut through my memories of family like a blade. My mother spoke again, this time without her usual calm tone. "We can't let anyone discover the collection. If they trace the origin, it'll link back to all the old transactions. If Sophia finds them, everything falls apart." I turned to Abigail, her eyes lighting up again. She quickly scribbled notes, each stroke bold and deliberate. "That collection, what is it really?" I whispered. Abigail shook her head. "We'll find out soon enough." On the other side of the wall, my father chimed in. "Are you sure they're still in the house? Eleanor might have moved them somewhere else." "No," my mother responded quickly. "She didn't have the time, and she thought she could hide them longer. But I know that house better than anyone. The library room, the wall behind the bookshelf. There's a hidden compartment. We'll go there tomorrow morning before the auditors arrive." I heard footsteps, papers shuffling, then the sound of water being poured, followed by a new male voice, clearly the buyer's representative. "But I need assurance. If those are truly antique paintings, their value is no less than $1 million. I won't transfer anything until they're verified." My mother spoke slowly. "You'll get the paintings, but you are not to contact anyone connected to Sophia. She no longer has any rights." Abigail motioned with her hand, then pointed at the clock. "Almost 8:30. She pulled out her phone and whispered, "We've got enough on tape. We need to leave before they wrap up." We slipped out of the hotel through the back elevator, unnoticed. On the way back to the office, I didn't say a word. I just held tight to the bag containing the recording, evidence of a crime covered up for years by my own flesh and blood. Once we were back at the office, Abigail immediately extracted the audio file and saved it onto 3 separate devices. She wasn't taking any risks. "Do you think my grandma knew about all this beforehand?" I asked, curled up in a chair, eyes gazing out the nighttime window. Abigail nodded. "Without a doubt. Eleanor didn't just revise her will. She deliberately added a clause to block the sale. That tells me she knew exactly what they were planning." I swallowed hard. "And she hid the paintings inside the wall. Because if they were discovered, your entire family could face investigation for tax evasion, money laundering, or worse, trafficking undocumented artwork." Abigail opened a drawer and pulled out a list. "Your grandmother had been in contact with an appraiser named Helen Reeves. This is a handwritten letter she wrote 6 months ago. It lists several paintings possibly belonging to a collection that's been missing since the 1940. I shivered. She knew what they were doing, and she tried to save everything in silence. Abigail looked at me for a long moment, then gave a small smile. "And she believed you would be the one to protect that legacy when the time came." The next morning, we arrived at my grandmother's house with a court-issued authorization and a temporary protection order to prevent anyone from interfering with a property under legal dispute. The first person we saw was my brother Brandon, standing awkwardly at the front door, a set of keys fumbling in his hand. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping in front of him. Brandon froze, his eyes darting from Abigail back to me. "Mom said she needed something checked in the library. I was just following instructions." "And the forged signature on the sale contract? Were you just following instructions then too?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat. Brandon bit his lip. "I'm sorry, Soph. I know I messed up. But everything was falling apart. The company, the debts were piling up. Mom said if we didn't come up with the money, there'd be an investigation." And the solution was selling off Grandma's last memory? I shook my head. You had a choice, and you picked the wrong side. Abigail stepped forward, holding out the court order. From this moment on, all activity on this property requires written approval from Sophia. Any attempt to enter, remove, or alter anything inside is a legal offense. Brandon lowered his head and handed over the keys. I took them and stepped into the house with a strange feeling. The soft scent of lavender was still there, Grandma's portrait still hung in the center of the room, but this time, I wasn't walking in as her granddaughter. I was walking in as the keeper of the truth. We headed straight for the library, where the walls were lined with antique books and muted sunlight filtered through the windows. I ran my hand along the wooden trim behind the third bookshelf, the spot my mother mentioned during the meeting. A soft click echoed. A small compartment opened behind the paneling. Abigail shone a flashlight inside. There were 4 rolled-up paintings in protective tubes, a wooden box engraved with Eleanor B., and a sealed envelope with a red wax stamp. I picked up the envelope, my fingers trembling. On the front, in my grandmother's handwriting, were the words, "For Sophia, when you're ready to face the truth." I opened it. Inside was a single note, written in her familiar script. It's not the paintings, but the story behind them that must be protected. And the truth, no matter how long it's buried, will always find the light. I looked up, my throat tight with emotion. Abigail smiled. We're going to bring that truth into the light. And I knew this was only the beginning. 3 days later, we submitted all the evidence we had gathered to the Portland City Police. Abigail personally presented the audio recording of the meeting, a copy of the forged contract, and the list of valuable paintings my grandmother had hidden. Works suspected to be linked to an illegal art trafficking network dating back to the 1990s. The lead investigator, Mr. Gregory Hale, was calm but had eyes that missed nothing. After reviewing the file and listening to the entire recording, he simply said, "There's enough here to open a criminal investigation. And if the paintings match this list, this won't just be a civil matter." That very evening, he requested we accompany him to the Arlington Hotel, where my parents were scheduled to meet the buyer for the transfer of additional assets, the hidden art collection. Abigail concealed a recording device in her coat pocket, and I had my phone already set to video mode. Vanessa came with us, clutching a folder of documents she had quietly copied from our mother's office. She was the first in our family to break the silence, and now she wanted to see it through. We stepped into the meeting room on the 14th floor just as my mother was pulling a fabric-wrapped painting from a suitcase. The unfamiliar man standing across from her, likely the collector, reached out to touch the frame but froze the moment he saw us. My mother turned around, her face going pale the instant she spotted me, Abigail, and Vanessa entering. "What is this?" she asked, voice calm but her hand tightening around her bag strap. "This," I said, raising my phone, "is the truth, and this time it's not staying hidden." My father stepped forward, trying to block me. "Sophia, you're walking into trouble. This isn't what you think." "Isn't what I think," I scoffed, then turned to the buyer. "Did you know the pieces you're planning to buy are listed as missing since 1948, according to records from the National Art Crime Database?" The man jerked his hand back. "Excuse me?" Abigail pulled out a letter of authentication from expert Helen Reeves. "The painting you're holding is one of several reported missing from the private collection of a Jewish family in France. If you accept it, you could be prosecuted for participating in an illicit transaction." Just then, police burst into the room. Inspector Hale led the team, instructing everyone to stay put, and immediately began seizing all paintings, documents, and related devices. My parents were stunned, while Vanessa stood beside me, her gaze fixed on our mother. "I used to think you did this for the family, but I was wrong. You were only trying to save your own power." My mother met her eldest daughter's eyes, her voice hardening. "I did everything for you." "No," I cut in. "You did everything to hide the truth, that this family was built on things no one dared to talk about, but today, That ends. My father dropped his hands and slowly sank into a chair, as if all strength had drained from him. Your mother didn't lie, he whispered. We made mistakes, but it was to protect the company. Our name. Inspector Hale interrupted. Mr. Bennett, we have evidence that your company used fake invoices, shipped counterfeit art to Europe, and received authentic works through furniture import routes. This is organized money laundering and doing it for the family doesn't exempt you from the law. Suddenly, the doors swung open. Brandon, my brother, entered with a tense expression. He looked at no one but me. Sophia, he said, I'm here to make a statement. Mom and Dad didn't act alone. There are other partners involved. I have documents. Abigail stepped forward to collect the stack of papers from him. I looked at Brandon, the same person who once forged my signature, and asked quietly, Why the change of heart? He sighed. Because I don't want to keep pretending. Everything Grandma did, she did for us. And me, I only ever listened to Mom. But now, I realize that silence is a form of complicity too. Inspector Hale accepted his statement and asked Brandon to stay for a full report. The art buyer left the room shortly after, leaving behind all documents and confirming his willingness to cooperate with the investigation. As police began collecting evidence, I walked over to my mother. She was still standing, arms crossed, her eyes not angry, just tired. Why you? She asked softly. I looked her in the eye. Because Grandma trusted me. Because I never saw that house as a possession. I saw it as memory. As the last proof of honesty in a family that got too comfortable hiding things. She didn't say another word. Abigail signaled for me to head out as officers began sealing the art crates. Vanessa gave my hand a light squeeze as we exited the hotel, and Brandon followed silently behind, his eyes fixed on the first signs of everything crumbling. But inside, I knew. This wasn't collapse, it was awakening. And I wasn't going to let it be silenced again. 2 months after the Arlington Hotel raid, my life changed completely. My parents, Carol and Griffin Bennett, were sentenced to 6 and 8 years in prison, respectively, after agreeing to cooperate with authorities and expose the full scope of the illegal art dealings they'd been part of. Under the direction of federal investigators, more than 10 others were arrested, including 3 major business partners of my family's furniture company. Individuals who had used wooden shipping containers as a front to smuggle art across borders for nearly a decade. Bennett & Co., once my father's pride, was now officially dissolved. The remaining legal assets after liquidation, including factories, trucks, and commercial properties, were redistributed by the court, with the majority returned to the estate of my grandmother, Eleanor Bennett. I was formally declared the sole heir to her entire personal estate, including the old house and the art collection, which had been appraised at over $3,400,000 by the insurance agency. I stood in the living room as the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the patterned glass windows, casting reflections on the freshly painted white walls. Vanessa was dusting the bookshelf, and Brandon was closing up the old wooden chest he had once planned to hide the paintings in. In the midst of all the loss, the 3 of us, who once had nothing left to hold us together, had rediscovered what my grandmother had spent her life protecting. Family isn't built on possessions, but on truth. I fixed the kitchen door, Brandon said as he passed me, his voice much softer than before. I nodded with a smile. Thanks. This house feels like it's been waiting for that. Vanessa stood upright, her hand resting on an old book embroidered with our grandmother's name. She left us more than we realized. I nodded. Not just paintings or property. She left us a chance to start over, this time with no more secrets. Every day in this house helped me understand why she kept everything here. Beneath the old tile floors were the footprints of our childhood. Above, on the ceiling, still remained the faint crack she once said, "Looked like a heart if you stand at just the right angle." And in every photo frame, every book, were traces of a woman who lived ahead of her time, quietly fighting to protect values more lasting than wealth. On Friday afternoon, lawyer Abigail stopped by with the final court confirmation. The house, all its contents, and the insurance settlement from the paintings were now legally mine. She placed the file on the coffee table, the same spot where my grandmother used to sit every afternoon, brewing tea and knitting handkerchiefs. "Congratulations, Sophia," Abigail said gently. "You kept your promise to her." I opened the file, scanning the red seals and signatures. No more disputes, no more forgeries, no more fearing tomorrow. I don't know what to say except, "Thank you," I replied, my heart light as if a boulder had been lifted from my chest. "There's one more thing you should know," she said, pulling out a small envelope. "This came from the archives, your grandmother's last letter, dated 1 week before she passed." I took the envelope and opened it. Her familiar handwriting appeared on cream stationery. "My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, then the secrets have likely come to light. I never wanted you to grow up with a heart full of doubt, but sometimes the truth needs time to rise. Keep this house as a place of healing, not just for you, but for all who've ever lost their way. I love you, Grandma." I folded the letter, my eyes stinging, but my heart strangely at peace. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Edward, the former art buyer, now an unexpected ally through the entire ordeal. "Hi, Sophia," he smiled, holding a carefully wrapped frame. "I stopped by to return this. I think it belonged to your grandmother." I unwrapped the package. It was the small watercolor painting she had hung in her bedroom, a spring garden scene. I'd always assumed it was a print, but now, looking closely, each brushstroke was clear. This was the original. Edward spoke gently. "I had it appraised. Turns out it was the debut piece of a well-known female artist from the 1920s. No signature, because your grandmother was her close friend." I laughed softly. She hid talent better than she hid old paintings. We hung the painting back in its original place, right above the fireplace. The house felt alive again. This time, without lies, only love, memories, and a new beginning. As the orange glow of sunset filtered through the windows, I stood on the porch with Vanessa and Brandon, 3 fractured pieces slowly stitching back together with the invisible thread of forgiveness. "Grandma was right," I said quietly. "We can lose everything, but as long as we still have trust, we can rebuild." Vanessa squeezed my hand. Brandon gave a small nod. This house had once buried secrets. Now it held the most precious things of all: truth, love, and family. Just as Eleanor always hoped. From my own story, I've come to realize that the most valuable legacy isn't money or rare paintings. It's truth and the courage to protect what's right. Even when betrayed by those closest to me, I chose to stand up, not for revenge, but to preserve the values my grandmother cherished all her life. In the end, the house wasn't just protected. It became a place of healing, of new beginnings, and of proof that truth always finds its voice. What do you think about Sophia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and meaningful stories about life and family. I never imagined I'd become a widow at 33, but here I was. Emily, I needed someone to sit in my small kitchen at 7 a.m., trying to hide my tears while making breakfast for my son, Lucas. He was only 7, far too young to grasp the full weight of the loss that had cast a shadow over our lives. It had been 8 months since the terrible accident at the construction site took the life of the man I loved most, Daniel. Yet some mornings the pain felt as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. Those first few months were a whirlwind. Paperwork, lawyers, sleepless nights counting the hours. Sometimes, I don't know how I made it through without the steady, quiet support of my in-laws, Linda and George. They were the light in the darkest room of my life. Every day after work, I stopped by their house to pick up Lucas. Linda would always greet me with a tight hug, and George would slip small envelopes of cash into my hand, as if afraid I'd say no. "Emily, just take it," Linda pleaded last week when I tried to shove an envelope back into her purse. We know the insurance came through, but family is about lifting each other up, not counting every dollar. She was right. After Daniel passed, the insurance company paid out $250,000. Combined with my marketing job, we were financially stable. But what I truly appreciated about Linda and George wasn't the money. It was the unconditional love they showed Lucas and me. If only my own parents had a fraction of that kindness. Growing up, I was always in the shadow of my brother Brandon, the golden child. In their eyes, he was perfect. I was just the extra. Even now, with Daniel gone, the favoritism lived on, just redirected to the next generation. Lucas, curious, bright, always asking about the world, only received annoyed glances when he spoke. I still remember last Saturday afternoon when we stopped by my parents' house. Lucas excitedly pointed to the old grandfather clock in the living room, eyes wide with wonder. "Grandma, why does that clock make creaky sounds when it moves?" My mother sighed heavily, shot me a look, and muttered loud enough for Lucas to hear, "Can't you teach that boy to be quiet? Brandon's kids never asked knowing things like that." My father, not even hiding his disinterest, quickly opened his laptop and handed Lucas a video game, as if to silence any more questions. Meanwhile, Brandon's 3 kids sat glued to their phones, barely acknowledging anyone. And yet to my parents, they were well-behaved. I forced a smile. I had long since learned that silence was often the only shield against their blatant favoritism. But inside, the hurt simmered like an ember that never went out. At least I had Linda and George. When I needed someone to pick up Lucas late due to work, they never hesitated. No complaints, no tallying favors, just love. Watching Lucas chatter to George about his science project, I silently thanked fate for bringing these in-laws into our lives. Life after loss is never easy, but it's the people who love you without condition who become the beacons lighting your path forward. That weekend, I brought Lucas to my parents' house for dinner, as usual. The tension hit the moment we walked through the door. Anna, my older sister, had already arrived with her 3 kids, Jason, Lily, and Emma, who, as always, sat silently on the couch, eyes fixed on oversized tablets. Lucas, in his red reindeer sweater lovingly knitted by Linda, cheerfully greeted everyone. He lit up at the sight of an antique phonograph in the corner and turned to my parents, eyes sparkling. "Grandpa, how does that machine play music?" That innocent question, meant to spark joy, earned only a glare from my mother. She set her utensils down with a harsh clang. "Emily, can't you teach him to be quiet for once?" she scolded. "Anna's kids never ask so many questions." My father, without a word, reached into a drawer, pulled out a tablet, and shoved it into Lucas's hands. "Here, play a game." "No more questions." I swallowed my protest. Not because I agreed, but because I'd grown numb to these comparisons. Since childhood, Anna had been the pride, and I, the disappointment. Lucas looked at me, clutching the tablet he didn't want. That look, sad and out of place, stabbed straight through me. Meanwhile, Jason was kicking the table leg, Lily popped gum noisily, and Emma giggled at some silly video. None of them had greeted our parents, yet my mother beamed with pride, turned to me and said, "See how well Anna raised her kids? They know how to behave. They don't bother the adults." I bit my lip. If good behavior meant staring at a screen and ignoring everyone, I'd rather Lucas ask 1,000 questions. At dinner, my mother placed Lucas far from the others. Anna's kids were seated in the place of honor. Every time Lucas spoke, she gave him a sharp look to silence him. Meanwhile, the sound from Jason's phone filled the room. And no one said a word. It all boiled over when Lucas softly asked, "Grandma, why do we eat soup before the main dish?" That harmless question made my mother drop her spoon with a sigh, as if he had committed a crime. "Emily, please control your child," she said coldly. "We're trying to enjoy a peaceful dinner." I clenched my fists under the table. My cheeks burned with anger and shame, but I stayed quiet. Lucas eventually went silent, his face buried in his bowl, shoulders trembling. I watched the sweetest, brightest child I knew shrink into himself to appease people unworthy of his light. After dinner, Anna bragged that Jason would be getting a new iPhone despite his average grades. My mother gushed, "Such a good boy, so well behaved, he deserves it." I said nothing, just quietly took Lucas's hand and led him to the porch. The winter air bit at my skin, a reminder that this place was no longer home. Lucas looked up at me, his brown eyes full of confusion. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" My heart ached. I pulled him close and whispered, "No, baby. You're perfect. I'm proud of you. More than anything in the world." In that moment, I knew I'd have to make a hard decision soon to protect him. A decision I never thought I'd have to make against my own family. On Tuesday night, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was unusually sweet, instantly putting me on guard. "This Sunday, let's all have dinner together, Emily. There's something important we need to discuss," she said, leaving no room to decline. I showed up with Lucas on time, but even at the door, something felt off. My mom, who never cared about my food preferences, had cooked my favorite honey-roasted chicken. My dad, too, was different. Asking about my job, Lucas, pretending to be interested in his curiosity. Near the end of dinner, the atmosphere shifted. My mom set her fork down and looked at me as if weighing something heavy. "Emily," she began slowly, "your father and I have something to ask. You know, families should support each other, especially after the kind of tragedy you've been through." A pit formed in my stomach. "We just want to know," my father cut in, "after Daniel passed, how much did the insurance company pay out?" I nearly dropped my glass. I froze, stunned they'd asked that. Maybe I was too tired, maybe I was just done hiding. I answered hoarsely, "Around 250,000. Their eyes lit up with a glint I couldn't unsee. Pure greed. My mother smiled too eagerly. "Sweetheart, you've done so well holding everything together. But you know, our expenses are rising, our health's declining." I clenched my hands in my lap, a cold anger creeping in. Anna, silent until now, chimed in sweetly, "You know, Emily, I've decided to send Mom and Dad $400 a month. It's not much, but I do what I can." I looked at her. She smiled kindly, but her eyes bored into me like a drill. My mom jumped in. "Emily, if you could send 1,000 a month, things would be so much more stable. You have a good job, the insurance helped, and Lucas doesn't need much. Please help us through this tough time." Their words hit me like ice water, not because of the money, but because they saw me as an endless bank account. "I'll think about it," I said flatly. That night, after tucking Lucas in, I sat in the kitchen for hours staring at Daniel's photo. He once promised to protect us, but now it was my own family forcing me into a battle I never saw coming. Days later, worn down by constant calls and draining texts, I gave in. I set up an automatic transfer, $1,000 a month gone from my account. I told myself, if this makes my parents happier, if they treat Lucas better, then maybe, just maybe, it's worth the cost. But from the very first month, I began to realize my sacrifice would never be enough for them. And then, an even more bitter truth was waiting ahead. One that made me see I wasn't just a victim of greed, but a pawn in a game that had been rigged from the start. That first month of sending the money, I tried to convince myself everything would be okay, that at the very least I'd get help when I needed it. But that hope shattered quickly, piece by piece. One Wednesday afternoon, I had an unexpected meeting at work and couldn't pick up Lucas after school. Linda had a mild cold, and George was at the shop getting the car serviced. Thinking it was time to lean on my own parents, I called my mom with a flicker of hope. "Mom, I've got a meeting today. Could you please pick up Lucas? I'd really appreciate it," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. On the other end, my mom sighed heavily. The sound of something being chopped clattered in the background. "Oh, Emily, my back hurts so much. I can barely walk, let alone drive to get the boy," she groaned. "Why don't you call Anna? She's healthier than I am." I swallowed my disappointment, gave a half-hearted thank you, and called Anna. She just scoffed. "What are you thinking?" "I have to take Jason to basketball, Lily to piano, and Emma has a dentist appointment. Who has time to help you?" I sat frozen in my car, phone still pressed to my ear, heart sinking like a stone. With no other choice, I called George. 5 minutes later, he was already at the school, cheeks flushed from the cold but grinning ear to ear when he saw Lucas. He told me all about that mini volcano model he made in class." George beamed when he brought Lucas to me later that evening. Bright and curious, he's a fantastic kid. Those words, simple but heartfelt, were a balm to my worn-out soul. But it wasn't a one-time thing. Every time I needed help, my mom had a new excuse. Headache, back pain, fatigue, a nail appointment, hosting friends. Another time, on Lucas's birthday, I wanted to throw a small party at home with just close family. I hesitantly asked my mom, "Would you be able to come early and help me prepare a little?" She answered flatly, "Oh, I already have a golf date with my friends. You'll have to manage." Meanwhile, Linda and George arrived early with a cake, balloons, and a giant gift box for Lucas. They decorated, cooked, and prepped everything, as if it were their own grandchild's birthday. I stood in the kitchen, eyes stinging, watching Lucas wrap his arms around Linda and laugh joyfully. He'd lost his father, but he still had people who truly loved him. All the while, that $1,000 kept leaving my account every month, disappearing into a void, with nothing in return but neglect and indifference from my own parents. One day, I called my mom. Her voice was cold, distant. "Emily, I'm busy. Let's talk tomorrow." I had only wanted to ask if she could come to Lucas's first school play, but I didn't bother explaining. I just hung up. That night, in the packed auditorium, only Linda and George showed up, waving excitedly from the third row. Lucas scanned the crowd. When he saw them, his face lit up. He stepped onto the stage, more confident than ever. I clapped, tears streaming down my cheeks before I noticed. I realized then, the people who truly love my son don't need money to care. They love him for who he is, not what they might gain. And right there, deep inside, a quiet resolve began to grow. I would not let Lucas grow up in an environment of toxic comparisons and conditional affection. One day I would break free from these chains. One day, I'd teach Lucas that real love never has a price tag. A week before Christmas, Lucas and I were hanging red ornaments on the tree when the phone rang. It was my mom. "Emily, we're having our usual Christmas Eve dinner," she began, her voice sweet with artificial cheer. "But this year it'll be adults only. No kids, okay?" I froze. "What do you mean? Lucas isn't invited?" "That's right, sweetheart. We want a more elegant evening. Wine, adult conversation. None of that noisy kid stuff. Lucas can stay with Linda and George. I'm sure they'll be thrilled." I stood still, the cold starting from my heart and reaching my fingertips. I forced a reply. "Okay, I'll figure it out." I've never told Lucas. How could I explain that on the most magical night of the year, a night meant for children, his own grandparents didn't want him there? All week I wrestled with my thoughts. Would skipping the dinner be too extreme? But bringing Lucas only to have him sit outside wasn't right either. In the end, I chose a middle ground. I'd leave Lucas with Linda and George for a few hours, show up to my parents' house to do my duty, and leave quickly. On Christmas Eve, I drove alone, carrying carefully wrapped gifts. The driveway was packed, more cars than any year before. As I reached the porch, I heard laughter and holiday music from inside. But what froze me in place was the scene that greeted me when the door opened. Kids everywhere. Jason was chasing Lily around the tree. Emma sat under the table building blocks with Aunt Lucy's little ones. Even distant cousins' children were smashing toy hammers in the middle of the living room. I stood paralyzed, hand clutching the gift bag until my knuckles turned white. "Emily, you made it!" Anna beamed, rushing over. "Come in, everyone's waiting." I stepped inside, the noise of the children roaring in my ears. One burning question in my mind: if it's an adult-zone party, why are all the kids here? Except for Lucas. An aunt approached with a smile. "Where's Lucas? Don't tell me he's sick." Before I could answer, my uncle chimed in. "Yeah, I was hoping to see that sweet boy tonight." Whispers started to spread like wildfire. I slipped through the crowd, searching for my mother. She was laughing, pouring wine, completely ignoring my piercing stare. I took a deep breath, walked straight to her. "Mom," I said, calm but firm. "We need to talk." She flinched slightly, then recovered and pulled me toward the hallway near the kitchen. "You said this was adults only," I said flatly. "So why are all the other kids here except for Lucas?" She pressed her lips together, avoiding my gaze. "Lucas, he's just too excitable, Emily. Don't you see? At gatherings like this, we need children who know how to be quiet and not cause a scene." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh? Because Jason nearly knocked over the tree, Lily was screaming, and Emma kicked the sofa. That's your idea of good behavior?" She went silent, then forced a weak smile. "They're just kids, Emmeline. Don't ruin Christmas." I stood there, feeling my heart splintering. Without another word, I turned and walked out of that suffocating house, leaving behind the music, the laughter, and the carefully rehearsed smiles. I didn't open gifts. I didn't say goodbye. My footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor, striking the decay of a relationship I had tried too long to mend. That Christmas Eve, I finally understood. In my parents' eyes, Lucas and I would never be good enough. Not for their warped standards, not for their hollow approval. But I didn't leave right away. My feet carried me not to the door, but to the middle of the living room, where everyone gathered around the big tree, still laughing. I set the gift bag down, took a deep breath, and raised my voice over the Christmas music. "Everyone," I said. The room quieted. All eyes turned toward me. "You're probably wondering why I came alone tonight. Why Lucas, the boy so many of you adore, isn't here." A few people nodded. I heard Aunt Lucy whisper, "I thought he was sick." I smiled faintly, eyes locked on my mother, frozen by the drink table. "The truth is," I continued, voice sharp, "my mother clearly told me this was an adults-only party, no kids allowed." Gasps rippled through the room. Anna glanced nervously at our mom. Jason, Lily, and Emma looked up from their phones. "But, as you can all see," I said, motioning to the swarm of children, "there's no such rule. There's only one child who wasn't welcome. My son." The room felt like it froze over. My mom rushed toward me, hissing, "Emily, this isn't the time." "No, Mom," I cut in, unnervingly calm. "This is exactly the time for the truth." I turned to the rest of the family, my voice unwavering. For months I'd been sending my parents $1,000 a month, hoping they'd love and support Lucas. I thought I was doing the right thing, trying to make up for what he lost. A stunned silence settled. I continued before anyone could interrupt. My mom said Anna was also contributing $500 a month, but it turns out, I turned sharply to Anna, that was a lie. Anna's face drained of color. "Emily, I was just doing what Mom and Dad told me." "You didn't send a single dollar, did you?" I asked, voice like steel. Anna looked down, unable to respond. The shockwave spread. My uncle stood up, glaring at my mom. "You Made your youngest daughter pay your bills while your eldest lied and did nothing? Aunt Lucy whispered. How could you treat your own child this way? The atmosphere turned into a storm of chaos. Voices of questioning, outrage, and blame swirled around my parents and Anna. My mom stammered, trying to explain. We just wanted to help Anna when she was struggling. You've always been more independent, Emily, so… Independent? I let out a dry laugh. So the price of independence is being taken advantage of? Accepting that my son, a boy who lost his father, gets excluded from his own family on Christmas night? My father, who had managed to stay cold and silent until now, finally snapped. We don't need to humiliate each other in front of the whole family. I stared him down without blinking. This isn't humiliation. This is the truth. The truth this family has been hiding under a mask of false morality for years. A heavy silence filled the room. Relatives began grabbing their coats, herding their kids toward the door, shaking their heads in disgust. I didn't wait another second. I turned and walked straight out, leaving behind the twinkling lights and stunned faces. Outside, snow had begun to fall softly. I looked up at the black sky, took in a sharp breath of freezing air, and felt lighter, as if I had finally broken free from a chain that had bound me for years. I left that house in silence, my shoes sinking deep into the thick snow covering the walkway. Each step peeled away a piece of the past I had clung to for far too long. When I opened the car door, my hands were still trembling slightly, but my mind had never been clearer. I sat down in the driver's seat, pulled out my phone, and opened the banking app. With a few taps, I canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $1,000 to my parents' account. A small message popped up, transaction canceled. A simple action, but it carried the weight of uprooting a wound that had been embedded in my heart for years. I started the car, pulled away from the house, and left behind the shouting and arguing that still echoed from inside. Within hours, the news had spread through the family. I didn't need to say a word. My parents' actions had exposed them on their own. The next morning, as I was making breakfast for Lucas in our warm kitchen, my phone buzzed non-stop. Message after message poured in from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Emily, you did the right thing. We saw everything clearly. Don't let them drag you down again. You still have real family standing by your side. Each message felt like a soft, warm blanket wrapping around my heart. I hadn't felt this free in years. That afternoon, while playing with Lucas at the park, I got a call from Lisa, my cousin's wife. You won't believe what happened last night, Emily, she said, her voice dropping as if sharing a secret. After you left, the whole house exploded. Everyone started leaving, furious. But that's not all. My grip on the phone tightened. Anna's husband, Andrew, Lisa continued. When he found out Anna had lied about sending money and helped deceive you, he lost it. He packed up the kids and said, right there in front of everyone, that he was taking Jason, Lily, and Emma to his parents' house for Christmas, and Anna could stay behind and think about what she'd done. I froze. Andrew was known for being calm, never the type to make a scene, but he'd made a firm choice. On Christmas night, no less. Anna cried and begged, but it didn't work, Lisa added. Andrew said he needed time to think about the marriage. He couldn't believe the woman he trusted could be so cruel to her own sister. I closed my eyes, letting the icy wind brush across my cheeks. Maybe, finally, justice had found its own way, even if late. That night, I received a flood of texts from my mom, dad, and Anna. We just wanted what's best for the family. Ev, don't let something small tear us apart. Sis, I messed up. But don't take it this far. I read every message, eyes dry. Not a single real apology. Just excuses, shifting blame, and desperate attempts to pull me back into a life where I stayed silent and they kept taking. I didn't reply. I no longer owed anything to people who treated family like a bargaining chip. I pulled Lucas into my arms, breathing in the clean scent of his hair. He giggled and asked sweetly, "Mom, next Christmas, can we spend it with our real family?" I smiled, tears spilling over, not from sadness. "Absolutely, sweetheart," I whispered, "with the ones who truly love us." This Christmas, I lost a family, but I found myself, and that was worth more than anything in the world. The days after Christmas passed in a calm I hadn't known in years. No more pushy texts, no more guilt-tripping calls. Just me, Lucas, and the people who truly cared for us. But peace didn't last long. On New Year's morning, as Lucas and I were decorating the living room with the handmade crafts he'd made, the doorbell rang. Through the small window, I saw my parents and Anna standing on the porch, holding a large gift box wrapped in bright red paper. Their faces were pale from the cold, but their eyes were filled with hesitation and calculation. I cracked the door open and stood firmly in the doorway. "Emily, sweetheart," my mom began, in a tone unusually gentle, "your dad and we've thought a lot about everything. I'm sorry for what happened." Anna stood behind her, clutching the edge of her coat. "Emily, I really am sorry. I messed up." I kept my expression cold, my eyes locked on them. "We brought a gift for Lucas," my dad added, extending the box like it could fix everything. "Something special, to make things right." I glanced at the big box, just a cheap distraction, nothing more. "My parents apologized," my mom continued quickly. "Just give us a chance, and we can mend this family." I stood silent for a few seconds, feeling the cold wind slipping through the crack of the door. Then, slowly and clearly, I said, "You're not sorry for hurting me and my son. You're only sorry you got exposed in front of everyone." My mother's face turned pale. My father clenched his fists, veins bulging. Anna stared down at the ground. "All these years," I went on, voice calm but razor sharp, "you treated me like your personal bank, and Lucas, a boy who lost his father, was treated like a stranger. Every word of affection came with a price tag, and now, just because your reputation's on the line, you come begging for forgiveness?" No one responded. Only the wind and their shallow, ragged breaths filled the silence. I shook my head and pushed the door a little closer shut. "Lucas doesn't need hollow gifts," I said, locking eyes with them. "My son needs a family that loves him with their hearts, not with neatly wrapped boxes covering up guilt." Anna broke in, voice choked. "Emily, I've already lost Andrew. I don't want to lose you too." My grip tightened on the doorknob, and all the years of deception and disrespect came rushing back. "You didn't lose me because of tonight," I said firmly. "You lost me the day you helped our parents build a lie to take money from me, and then turned your back on your own nephew on Christmas Eve." My parents stayed silent, their faces contorted in a mix of anger and helplessness. I stepped back and spoke with finality. "From now on, I don't want you or Anna showing up at my house again." Without waiting for another word, I closed the door. The sound of the wooden latch clicking into place was like a full stop to years of endurance. Through the window, I watched them linger in the yard for a few more minutes, as if hoping for a miracle to reopen the door. But that miracle would never come. Lucas came running in, holding the wooden train George had given him for Christmas. "Mommy, who is at the door?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. I knelt down and gently brushed his hair, smiling softly. "Just some people from the past, sweetheart. But we don't need them to have a happy family." Lucas beamed, pulling me into the living room where the trees still sparkled with lights. And there, wrapped in the warmth of real love, I knew I had found a true home for us. That spring, I officially closed an old chapter of my life. The money that used to be drained from my account each month for my parents now went directly into a college savings fund for Lucas. Every time I saw that small but steady balance grow, I felt a quiet joy I couldn't put into words. I was building my son's future with love and intention, not by holding on to hollow relationships. Our lives changed quickly. No more guilt-tripping calls, no more suffocating dinners filled with comparisons and silent jabs. Just peaceful afternoons, evenings full of laughter, and weekends overflowing with love. Sarah and George, my former in-laws, became an irreplaceable part of our lives. One Saturday afternoon, when I picked Lucas up from their place, he skipped to the car, clutching a model spaceship he and George had built together. "Mom?" Lucas beamed, eyes glowing. "Grandma and Grandpa said we're going to visit the Space Center in Houston this summer." I laughed, pure happiness welling up inside me. Lucas now had real grandparents, not the kind who demanded and manipulated, but the kind who truly loved and nurtured him. And it wasn't just Sarah and George. Daniel's extended family also opened their arms to us. Uncle Robert often invited us over for backyard BBQs. Aunt Kate taught Lucas how to bake cookies. His cousins, Alex and Henry, played baseball with him every weekend. Lucas, once a boy who kept his head down out of shame, was now confident and radiant. He asked 1,000 questions, and this time, instead of eye rolls, he was met with patient, loving answers. One evening, while I was reading on the sofa, Lucas quietly climbed into my lap. "Mom," he whispered, "can I call George and Sarah my real grandparents now?" I froze for a moment, tears shimmering in my eyes. I stroked his hair and whispered, "Of course you can, sweetheart. They are your real grandparents." From that day on, Lucas called Sarah and George Grandma and Grandpa without hesitation, and I knew in his young heart the meaning of family had been redefined, not by blood, but by love. We began building new traditions of our own. That Christmas, instead of squeezing into tense, guilt-ridden dinners, we hosted a small gathering at our home with Sarah, George, and our cousins. We baked cookies, decorated the tree, and sat by the fire sharing stories from the year. Lucas received so many gifts, not expensive, meaningless ones, but presents chosen with love. A book about space, a small science kit, a warm sweater stitched with the words "Dream Big" across the chest. That night, Lucas fell asleep on the couch clutching his new teddy bear, and I sat beside him, heart overflowing with gratitude. I knew I had chosen the right path. I had walked away from a cycle of old wounds, broken free from relationships built on demands, not love, and instead created a new life for my son. A life where he was cherished, respected, and free to be himself. In the end, I realized that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love and genuine respect. Cutting ties with toxic relatives opened the door to a new life for me and Lucas, one filled with meaning, peace, and real connection. I no longer try to hold on to things that were never truly mine. Now, each day is a step forward, building a future on values that matter and a deep belief in a happier life for both of us. What do you think about Emily's journey and her brave decision? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and moving stories about love and family.